isn't original with us. I wish I could say it was brilliant and that I had come up with all this on my own. I didn't. But we thought it was really valuable to do something like this. For our church family to be able to say, here are the areas of strength for our church. So we're going to get to that at the end. Here at the beginning, what I want to do is give you something of a report on where we are and what we're trying to accomplish so that you are up to speed on that. And let me say, in a few minutes, I'll be mentioning that, well, I'll just mention it at the time rather than get out of line. First thing I want to mention to you is the advisory committee progress, and I just stated that we're reading this book that's entitled Soaring Between Pastors, and the focus of the book is to help a church use the time of transition to get stronger. Because I think a lot of times people view this time as a time that the church is going to be weaker because we don't have a pastor and we're et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to be that way. And so what we're doing in reading this is trying to get some good clues, some good ideas as to what we can do as a church family to be strengthened. And building on our present strengths is one of those things we're doing. The second thing that the advisory committee is working on is our church constitution update. And you could say, yeah, we've been working on that since just right after Moses crossed the Red Sea. It's been a little while in the making. And part of that is that going through our Constitution word for word takes time. We have a deacon retreat, advisory committee retreat, Saturday, and we're going to be spending a good portion of that time trying to reach a conclusion on the second part of this. We've already voted, if you remember, on the doctrinal part. Now we're working through what would typically be referred to as the bylaws part of this. And so that's something else that we're doing in order to strengthen our church, not only to have a more accurate and up-to-date doctrinal statement, but also to have a more accurate and up-to-date constitution. So that's something else that they're working on. And in addition to that, they're working on plans for a search committee, not only in terms of who is on it, but what its role will be. The role of the search committee, essentially is going to be to narrow down what are we looking for, what are the characteristics and the qualities that we want in our next pastor. And so there will be some things that the search committee will be doing in order to get information from you and feedback from you so that we as a church are on the same page as to what we're going to be doing. But that will be a part of the search committee. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, what is the search committee? According to our present constitution, the search committee is made up of the deacon board. So I don't like to use the word board. The advisory committee minus the pastor, so the deacons. We thought that was a little thin in terms of what we should have. So what we want to do is add an equal number of people to that search group so that it goes from 4 to 8. Now, if the Lord moves David and Joanne in the short term, it may be 7. We'll see how this plays out. But it'll be 7 or 8, and 2 of those other 4 will be men, and 2 of them will be women. And we wanted to be sure that we had representation from the congregation, and we wanted to be sure that we had representation from both sides of the gender aisle. And so that's what the search committee will look like. In terms of interim progress, we have had discussions with Scott Owen from Baptist Church Planters. Scott is the regional rep, if you will, for this part of the country, for Baptist Church Planters. And And we've known Scott. He spoke at our state meetings a couple years back. Jan and I have known Scott from BCP as well as from Faith. And so there's a long history, a long connection with Scott. I don't know how much of this I should say. I wasn't sure about Scott for a while. And then when he was at our state meetings, I was really impressed with Scott's ability to communicate, with his godliness, his love for the Lord, his love for the church. I just was really impressed with Scott and felt like, my impressions of Scott before were not full. And I felt like I had a much better idea of who he was and feel much, much more comfortable if Scott ends up being the man who is our interim. So we had a meeting with Scott on February 15th. He was in town here for, actually flew into Denver and was here with us on Saturday, and then on Sunday was down in Pueblo West for their 25th anniversary celebration, since that is a Baptist Church Planters church plant, or was. He has sent some forms for us to work on in the event that BCP does end up being the group through which we go for an interim pastor. Some of them are church evaluation forms, and it's not, I've talked with some of you about it. The form is imperfect. I think it has some, there's one where I feel like the first out of 6, the first 4 are all horrible, and the next 2 are practically deity. And where do you fit into that? So it's not the perfect form, but it's the thing that they use for evaluation, and they want the congregation. So there's maybe a dozen or so of you that we've passed these out to, the deacons, and then some more folks, and just to get a kind of a cross section of our church. There's also a church information report that we're working on. Gloria and I are working on the last couple pieces of this, which have to do with attendance figures over the last 10 years and finance figures over the last 5 years, and some of those kinds of things that we still need to get in. And that'll give them a sense of who we are, and then we can make our decisions moving forward as to whether we want Scott to be the guy. We've also had discussion with a man named Joel Tetro, which was a really interesting, I'd have let Warren tell the story. This was a really interesting, what's that? Warren and Carol were back visiting Jenna and her family, and as they were flying home from that, if I get anything wrong, let me know. If they're flying home from that, they're talking about, looking at the Soaring Between Pastors book, and he and Carol were talking about it, and Joel is sitting in the seat in front of them. And he listens for a little while. I think they call that eavesdropping. And finally he turns around and says, that's what I do for a living. I help churches go through this process. So they had a neat conversation on the plane, and they brought that information back, and I contacted Joel, and he and I, and actually another guy from their organization, we had a conversation as well. And I haven't had a conversation with them since. I don't really want to go in 2 different directions at the same time, so I'm kind of working with Scott right now, but we'll see what happens with that. Oh yeah, what was the other piece?
The other piece is that he has stayed with Gloria and David.
Yes, yeah. So he and his mom and dad, right?
And his mom and dad were there once and then twice, and then they had to come back again, and Joel was with them that time at our casino in Los Gatos, California.
So there's that connection. Plus there's people he knows, like he knows David Swope down in, David was our men's retreat speaker year before last, I think. So he knows David, there's a number of people that we know, that he knows. There are connections, including some here that are local, and I'll mention one of those here in just a moment. Yes, Gloria?
And he knows my roommate from my first year in college.
So it was a fun connection. I enjoyed my conversations with Joel. I think this is a man who really loves helping churches. And it would not be a bad thing if we were to go in that direction. So that's our interim progress, where we are right now in the conversations we've had. I mentioned the search committee, that we're looking at a committee of between 7 and 8. This is the last town hall kind of a thing where I will be the spokesperson. Because after this, whoever is the chair of the search committee, and once the search committee is finalized, then they'll select a chair, a spokesperson, and that will be the spokesperson for the search process from that point on. You're saying, well, why would that be the case? Well, because I want our church family to get used to the idea of a person speaking for the future of the church, not the past of the church. So that's that person will become the spokesperson, and he or she will function that way throughout the process. And the committee will function together as a committee through the process. So the men who are deacons right now will stay on the search committee even if they go off the deacon board. We had this discussion because Donald would be going off. He would be terminated. After this, as far as the deacons are concerned, but he would stay on the search committee. So it's going to continue to function until such time as a new pastor is in place. I mentioned that they're going to be looking at what are we looking for. The search committee will also be dealing with working alongside the interim pastor in terms of gathering resumes, vetting those resumes, filtering through those and saying, who is it that we want to come as a candidate? Typically, and I would hope that this would be the focus of the search committee, because it's the right way to do it. Typically, it's one at a time. So if you bring somebody in and you have that person as a candidate and you vote on that person, if you vote that person up and he says no, or you vote him down, then you go to the next candidate. But you don't have a beauty contest where you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 guys up here and say, we want the person behind door number 1. It's one at a time. So the search committee will stay in contact with all of that. And then I've done some things here that I want to put in front of you, just from the perspective that you know that we have had some conversations. I emailed David Swope. David is the pastor at, I forgot, is it Faith Baptist? I forget the name of the church, but it's in Mesa. And just said, David, would you pray about the possibility of Rustic Hills? And I've also had lunch when we were at the Refresh Conference. I had lunch with Josiah Brown, and got to know his wife a little better, got to meet their little one. That was an enjoyable lunch. And just said to Josiah, would you be praying about this as well? Both men said, we'll be praying about it. I said to both of them, I don't have any right to ask you if you would think about being a candidate. I simply want to ask you to pray about Rustic Hills and see if the Lord might lay it on your heart. There's one other discussion that I've had, and that is right around the corner from us is Peak Bible Church. Ryan King is the pastor. You might remember Ryan from not the last sportsman's dinner we had, but the one before that. He and his kids were here, and he had maybe 4 or 5 guys from his church that were here. We're part of that sportsman's banquet out here when we held it out here behind the church. Ryan is planting a church that came out of Mesa Hills Bible Church. But Ryan's background is, you guys will be interested in this, Ryan's background is Springfield. That's where he went to school. And when he and I had a conversation, he said, well, I'm pretty thoroughgoing Baptist, even though I'm in the IFCA. And so we had a conversation about the possibility, because they're going to be losing their place of meeting. They're meeting at a Lutheran church that is very close to, they're down less than 10, and everybody's old. And so they were kind of hoping that they might have a shot at that building but the Lutheran Church believes it's worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $4 million, and which would surprise me, but if that's really the case, but that's way out of their budget, and so eventually they'll be out of a place to meet. So we had lunch, and he and I are going to have lunch again this week, but there would be obstacles to overcome if there were going to be some sort of a merger between their church and our church. So I don't know whether that's a possibility or not, or whether that would fly or not, whether you would be interested in that or not, or whether we would be interested in a church as hosting them in the event that they lose their lease over there. So that's some of the conversations that we have had. There would be some benefit. I think Ryan is sharp. If you read their doctrinal statement for their church, you're going to find very little in that doctrinal statement that would be different from us. But there are a couple things that are different. It is a Bible church. It is not a Baptist church, so their church government is different than ours. Yes?
We go to a Bible study Tuesday mornings with him and a bunch of other guys from other churches, and he's getting his doctorate from John MacArthur School.
Yeah, so he's going out to, master's, university. Sharp guy. And again, their doctrinal statement is well worded, very biblical in most respects. I think, again, a few differences with us, but not tons. So those are some of the things that have been going on. I wanted to just take a couple minutes and see if you had any questions. We want this to be as transparent and open and as much a family process as we possibly can. So we're trying to share with you everything that we're doing and everything that's going on. And you might be thinking to yourself, why are you even thinking in such a direction? Or why did you even do that? Or go ahead and shoot, and we can tell you what our thought process was. Gene?
The formation of that search committee, we don't have but just a handful, if even that, in the church. So I would highly recommend that we put a young teenager in that group.
A teenager in that group. We hadn't thought about putting a teenager in that group.
We have one teenager.
I'm specifically looking at the Belk boys, one, at least one of them, or something.
Well, we would have two if you count,
Jayden.
no, Hawthorne. Yep.
I have a 22-year-old grandson who's on the search committee for Vista Grande Baptist Church. And he said he wanted to be on it because he didn't want old people picking in the shoes.
Well, there is some,
So they've been at it for 2 years. And
Yeah.
he's sticking with it.
there is some truth to that. There's a benefit to having younger people on it. Donald is on that committee, obviously, so that helps us in that regard. But the other three deacons are all over 50, so barely. Thanks, Doc. Yes? Oh, can we? Okay. I think it's on. But maybe we can pop this up a little bit more.
The thing that she wants is somebody training back.
Yeah. Well, both questions were asked. Okay, anybody else with a question? So just so that for those who are listening, what Gene asked was, is it possible for us to have somebody young, as young as a teenager, on the search committee, at least to make sure that we have young people? And Donna mentioned that her grandson is functioning on a search committee in a different church, and he's 22, and wanted to do that from that perspective, that we wouldn't have just, a geriatric.
Learning curve, leadership, training.
Yeah, it could be both. You're right. It could be a learning curve and leadership training for somebody young.
And in that direction, we do have Cameron, who's faithful to come even on his lunch hour every week. So that's, another young person that we have. Cameron Delmonico?
I don't know how many of you guys know that. Cameron goes to work early on Sunday morning, leaves work, takes his lunch hour to come to service.
And probably a break in there too.
Pardon me?
And probably a break in there too.
So he jams all that together so he can be with us. So when you see Cameron leave at 1:15 and I'm not done yet, he's not leaving because he disagrees, although he might disagree. But that's not why he's leaving. He's leaving because he has to get back to work. He's on his lunch hour while he's with us. That is just, to me, that is just amazing and really speaks highly of Cameron's commitment. And so I think that's, just so you know what's going on, I think that's really pretty cool. All right, anyone else? If Cameron's listening, kudos to you, bud. Donald, we're going to get you some steps in tonight.
I think it would be beneficial for, and we did this in the military, and that's for our church to develop what we termed as a continuity three-ring binder. So when the new man comes in, he's not totally lost. He's got a list of phone numbers. He's got a list of contacts. He knows how to turn the air conditioners on and off. I mean, and that's going to take a great deal of time and input from a lot of people in the church to put that together. Otherwise, he's going to come in here and whoever it is, and he's just going to basically be scared to death, treading water for a long time till he gets his feet underneath of him.
I think the idea of a continuity binder is a great idea.
And that's going to take input from, I would say, everybody in the church. As an example, my wife is going to have input on that of what she does in the morning for our
Right.
little breakfast bar.
Right.
Okay? Mike Matthews put something together for what he does, how security is supposed to work, and where the security document is.
Right.
And that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's just a couple of ideas that I think needs to be done, because I've been in that position going into units and don't know squat about nothing, and you've got basically 48 hours to figure it out. It's
Well,
scary.
in which case, you probably have also looked at a continuity binder like that and you said, this page here, this is trash. We're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And there could be some things like that.
Yes.
One of the things you have to recognize, and especially difficult for a church that's had the same pastor for 3 decades or longer, is that a new guy coming in isn't going to do everything the same way. And he's going to do some things differently that you think, I wish he wouldn't do that, but that's what God has put in here. So one of the things we have to be used to is the concept of change. There will be change. It's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of where and how much.
That's the decision of the leadership after you're gone, to sift through that continuity book. And what are we going to do? What are we going to continue? What are we going to quit? What are we going to start up? Where are the
And-
holes at?
Yeah, and what is untouchable, right? So if somebody comes in here and says, well, I'm not a dispensationalist, well, that's untouchable. That's who we are. That's our doctrine. That's our identity as a church. But if they come in and say, I preach a little different than Pastor Lightfoot did, well, okay, that's not necessarily bad. That could be a good thing. So, all right. Anyone else?
I got one
Gloria's,
more.
go ahead.
I got one more.
All right, and then Gloria.
I don't want to put you on the spot or anybody else on the spot, but it's very, very hard to do a transition when you don't have a target window of when this is going to happen, okay? For example, during Desert Storm, I was notified 45 days prior to me deploying that I was going and where I was going. That gave me a window to start prepping me and my people
Yeah.
for that type of atmosphere type thing. At the other end, my counterpart at the other end knew that I was coming in 45 days and he knew that he had 45 days to get his collective act together and finish up any projects that he was going on and so on and so forth, so that there was a smoother, what we call passing the pencil. Okay, because literally, I got off the plane and my guy I was replacing got on the plane I came in on. So there was no time to sit down and chit chat about nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's part of the reason why you got an announcement from me at the beginning of this year, so that we could start working toward where are we going, what are we trying to accomplish as a church. There will likely be some overlap. I don't know that there will be any overlap between me and an interim pastor. There might be some, but there will likely be some overlap between the interim pastor and who our regular pastor is, so that you get some of that overlap, if you will. We are, in terms of a timeline, actually this is one of the things in our prayer time this morning and yesterday morning, as we're praying about that timeline. We want God's time in this, not just ours. But we are going to try to keep massaging that. Right now the timeline is we come up with an interim pastor who will be on the field here sometime in the fall of this year, and then I would be done by the end of the year. Now, that could move up depending on who that person is, so we might do that more quickly. Wouldn't do it any more quickly than the end of summer, but it could move up a little bit. And then how long the interim is here really depends in large part on how soon we find a pastor that's going to come and stay for the whole time. So that part of the timeline is hard for us to say this is how long it'll take. And I'll say this, so that we are aware of this. Again, in our prayer time this morning, we talked about this and prayed about this. There are fewer men looking to be pastors today than there were when I came here. So 30 years ago, there were more men saying, I want to be a pastor, than there are saying, I want to be pastor today. And the result of that is that it could take us a little longer to find the man that God wants for our church, because there just aren't as many of them out there right now as there used to be. Just a second, we'll come back to you, but Gloria's got something.
To just comment on that, my coworker has been bringing it up every single week since I joined them in September, and his church has been searching for a pastor for 3 years now. So
I just want to reassure Gene that we're already in process of putting that binder together. I have been making up processes, especially from a practical point of view, and Jan has been helping me bringing her knowledge too. So I think that's a really great idea, and I've already had it going around in my head.
I think it's going to be imperative that people that have an interest or are doing something in the church provides that information back to you so that can be included. I mean, it can be a very, very small thing, but one of the small things that almost killed me over there was he left and didn't tell me what the combination to the safe was.
Those, I mean, there are little things that can fall through the cracks. That's true.
Right. And so now he is somewhere between who knows where, and didn't go back to his unit and took off on vacation and leave for a few weeks. So there I am, I'm just going crazy. I need to get in there, I can't get in there.
Yeah.
So I had to do workarounds, but I think
Did those workarounds involve
if we get
explosives?
that published and put out to the church, it could be on any kind of piece of paper type thing. Hey, the combination to the
Yeah.
to the safe is this,
Yep.
and so on and so forth.
Yep. All right, unless you have something imperative that you need to discuss, we're halfway through the hour, and we want to do this next part. It won't take a long time, but I want to be sure that you understand what we're going to do. I would like you to break up into groups of 6 or 8 and take the paper that you have been given, and I want you, first of all, to write down from your perspective. This is not from your perspective and your spouse's perspective. This is from your perspective. No cheating. If you cheat and look at your spouse's paper, you get a 0. We're not going to grade this, obviously. But you get my point. Don't do this as a group. You're going to get a chance to do it as a group, but do it first by yourself. And Donald has pens if you don't have one. Thank you. I was thinking about that earlier. I'm glad you thought of it. And then that group of 6 or 8 is going to get together, and I want you to pool your thoughts and come up with what you believe as a group is the top 10. And then we're going to have each group report those, and we're going to write down what we believe as a congregation is the top 10 strengths and positive health things of our church. Warren? Yeah, so what I would like for you to do, we have 25 minutes. I'd like for you to go 10 and 10. So that'll take us to, actually, let's do 5 and 10. So 5 on your own, then 10 with your group, and then the last 10 will be as a group here, okay?
So we can just sit here for 5 minutes?
You can sit right where you're at for 5 minutes, but then you need to get into a group quickly and make that group a group of 6 to 8, and then take that group and combine your ideas, condense your ideas into one, and then we'll get those together and we'll condense all of our ideas into one. And that one will be then our congregational thought on what are the 10 top strengths of our church. Somebody else had a hand up. Oh, Warren? It can. Yeah, anything that you think of as a strength of our church. What are the things that are positive, healthy, strength aspects of who our church is? If you're thinking to yourself, well, what about the weaknesses? We're going to get to that, but that's not tonight. Tonight is strengths. What are we good at? What as a church makes us a positive influence for Christ and in our community? So start that. In 5 minutes, I'll tell you to get together with your groups, and then after 10 minutes in the group, then we'll get together come back together as a big group. Bless you. Bless you again. May the fleas of 1,000 camels infest. Donald's got them. It's nice to have somebody who doesn't hurt himself when he bends down to pick something off the floor. Give it a week. Anybody else need a pen? Looks like we're good. No. It doesn't have to be number 1 is the best strength, number 2 is the second. It doesn't have to be that. Just whatever you think are strengths in any order. In fact, we're not going to put them in order at the end. We're just going to say these are the top 10 things that we think are strong about our church. Got about 2 more minutes. Yeah, I told David Bailey earlier, you have to come up with 10. If you don't come up with 10, then we stand you in front of a firing squad. So get them all down there. What's that? Yes. Yeah, mini marksman. We have a number of guys who are concealed carry, so get all 10 down. About one more minute. Hey, you three back there. You guys aren't sharing, are you? All right. Okay, just checking. Okay, if you would get in those groups of 6 to 8, so there should be 4 or 5 groups, I think, based upon how many are here. If you get in those groups of 6 or 8, and then take the 10 minutes to say, here's what my list says, your list says, yours, and let's combine into one. Each group needs to get a fresh copy of the top 10. Okay. So go ahead and feel. One of the reasons that we went to chairs instead of pews is that you could turn them toward each other. So feel free to unbolt these and face each other. Get in a circle. We can always. Yeah, they should be just fine if you unhook them. Don't unbolt them. Unhook them. Let's get the right word here. Yeah. Okay, is everybody clear on what you're doing? You're combining your 10 into one. What's this for? I don't think I should be doing this. Oh, for the end, yeah. Yeah. There's way too much laughter coming from this group. I did, I just noticed that. 5 minutes to go. Got about 3 minutes. Okay, about 1 minute to go. Once you have your groups 10 put together, bring it up here to the pulpit if you would. Well, good. Well, if I can't, you're the one who wrote it? Okay. Who's got your group thing? Just bring it on out. Well, I thought we only had 4 groups. 2, 3, 4. No, we have 5. Okay.
Chuck said, I should put that down. It's more that we have a diverse group from backgrounds.
Yeah.
It wasn't color, it was more, we have, people from lower income, higher income, all over the country kind of thing.
Yeah.
It isn't us and them kind of thing.
Yeah. I think this part is going to be the most difficult part for us to do because we have 50 responses. Some of them are going to be similar. What I would like to do is to go through and read these and have you vote and see how many people say yes, yes, yes. That should be one of the top 10. Okay? So don't vote more than 10 times. And make sure that, that as you're voting, you don't say, oh, wait a second, I voted for 10 and I like that one better than any of the 10 I wrote. Think about what you're doing here so that we can kind of come up with this. So here's, some of these will sound very similar. Some of them will be different, but maybe in the same line. So we might actually massage them as we put them together. But first list says depth of biblical doctrine. How many of you believe that the depth of biblical doctrine is one of the top 10 things in our church? Okay, I'm going to put down, I'm not going to sit and count every one of these. I'm going to put down about 90%. I thought we had 5 groups. I've got 6 pages.
I think one of them's mine.
Oh, one of them's yours. Is that it? Or is this it? That's it? Okay. All right. I kept thinking to myself, we had more people here than I thought we did. All right, the next one is solid Bible teaching, dispensational. How many say yes? Kind of goes on along with the first one? Okay. All right, welcoming congregation. Visitors aren't ignored. Okay, I'm going to say about 80% on that one. Sound, piano, and organ is in good shape. Instrumentalists. What do you, the group that said that, what do you mean by instrumentalists?
We've always had, a strength is we've always had people.
Yes, okay.
And they're fairly new. It's not like we're replacing our keys or replacing piano.
Right, okay. How many think that's a positive, one of the top 10? All right, I'm going to say about 60%.
I would say, to add to that, we said good music ministry all around, so I think that includes that, and it includes the songs that we use and so forth.
All right, so maybe that fits in with number 5. Music is tied to service and is not a separate part. So should we just kind of combine those thoughts? Okay, I'm going to say then, give it 100%. Number 6 is family-oriented, caring, family care groups in place. How many of you would say that that's a strength? Okay, I'm going to look at about 30%. All right, number 7 is people leave but continue in ministry. So people who leave our church continue in ministry someplace. How many of you think that's a strength of our church? Okay, couple. Leadership structure is sound and biblically based. How many of you would say yes? Okay. We focus on prayer and still have a time set for that. Yes? No? Pardon? Yeah, and as we go through these, if there's something similar, we'll indicate that. Okay, so again, raise your hands. We focus on prayer, still have a time set for that. Okay? All right, this next one is Chuck. We are a diverse, parentheses, DEI, group of believers. How many of you would like Chuck to explain himself? All right, so we're a diverse group of believers. So actually, when Warren came up, he was explaining this a little bit. We have people from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds, a variety of geographical backgrounds. We are not single tone racially. That's the kind of thing that goes on with this. So, how many would say that's a top 10? Okay.
No, Pastor,
Yeah.
in regard to that,
Uh-oh.
I agree because, when I was doing a song, people would come by and they would be like, hey, people would just bring their car in. Is there a black church? No. Is there a white church? No. What church is it? They were doing it.
We're gray, yeah. I'll tell you, if you didn't hear Frank's description of all of that, one of the things he did is hold up a black piece of paper and say, there's nobody on the planet who is this color. And then he held up a white piece of paper and said, nobody on the planet who's this color. We are all shades of brown. And it's just, that was really, I thought was really a very important thing. And that has nothing to do with what we're doing right here, but, all right. So doctrine is still there. And music ministry is there. The next one on here is that we have a paid facility. That is, our facility is paid for. We don't have any debt. How many think that's important? A strength. Okay. All right. Good finances. Hands. Okay. Friendly and diverse. So those are already been touched on. The next one, you might have to explain this to me. It says proactive / no hostility on issues.
Okay, so when something comes up, we discuss it, and we don't fight. Lots of churches have business meetings where they bite each other's heads off or split up over the color of the carpet or whatever. When we have an issue, even if somebody gets a little hot, it doesn't last more than a few minutes. We calm down, we talk it out, we work it out, and we never fight as a church.
We have not had, in the history of the church that I'm aware of, we have not had a church split. Some of you who've been here a little longer than me could tell me whether that's the case or not. It's not that we haven't had people who've left. Some people who've been very upset and left. That has happened, but we have never had a church split that I'm aware of. So, all right, so how many think that's a strength? Okay?
Pastor, along with that, you said the building's paid for, somebody said that.
Yeah.
I think it's up to, the upkeep is pretty good, like we have a newer roof and not any major things like that. I mean, the boiler,
It is, but you know, every time we have a boiler inspector in here, they tell us that this boiler will last till Jesus comes. I mean, it's just, it is one of those things that they built so well back in the day. Yeah, Lord, come quickly. Warren has a different perspective.
Yeah, when Gene was saying that about the book, I said, oh.
Yeah. All right, the last one on this list is a class on baptism and membership. In other words, when somebody wants to be baptized, we have a class for that, and we have a class for people who are thinking about becoming members of our church. And by the way, we just had a couple people who went halfway through the class and decided they were going to go somewhere else. That's part of what the class is for, so that people will look at us and say, this is not really where I want to be. Or they'll say, this is where I want to be. And it also gives us a chance to determine, is this person somebody that is really a believer? Have they been baptized? Are they really qualified to be a member of our church? So it's good. So how many think that that's a positive, a health, strength in our church? Okay.
And one that I didn't get a chance to write down, but we all agreed in our group, that's my sheet, was ladies ministry.
Okay. Yeah, we haven't seen that one yet, so let's just say it. The ladies' ministry in our church. How many of you think that would be a strength? It's on your sheet? Okay. All right. Okay, number one on this list is music, instrumentalist, and vocal. We've talked about that. Prayer chain. Pass along, I think that, is that a reference to the email I sent out?
Yes.
Okay. And ladies, so there's several things there. How many of you think that the ladies' prayer chain, take these in separate pieces. How many think the ladies' prayer chain is a significant strength of our church? Okay. The ladies especially are impressed with that, so. The weekly emails, we call them something different now, but we call them pressing forward. How many of you think that's a strength of our church? Okay, all right. And we already did the ladies. Caring members and support, did we have that already? Members that care for one another?
Under the family care group thing.
Yeah, we did have that, didn't we? Okay. Yeah, okay. Preaching from God's Word, we already have that. Outreach and VBS. That's actually, VBS is a part of outreach. Let's take those. Outreach in general, how many think that's a strength of our church? I agree. How many think our VBS is a strength of our church? Okay, I think that probably is better, but. Welcoming visitors we've had, prayer we've had, live streaming. How many of you believe that live streaming is a strength of our church? Okay? What was that, Donald?
I said the camera's raising its hand. All the people that would appreciate that aren't here, because they're probably
Live streaming, yes.
Pastor, do we know, have you had any feedback, like how many people were able to watch it?
Well, we can see that on YouTube. It'll say how many people have watched.
Well, I know, but sometimes we're out of town, so we'll watch it.
Yeah.
I was wondering if people watch it that can't.
It's not a ton. I would say probably we're in the 5 to 10 range on a weekly basis. Well, that part's true. There are some people who have said, I would watch if I could figure out how to get on there. I'll tell you what else will happen. It'll go up when our streaming is streaming. Right now it's herky-jerky. The live part is herky-jerky. But we can talk about that another time. Then there was consistency / attendance / book discussions. I think there were several things that got put all together there. How many of you think that attendance at our church right now is a strength? All right, what about the book discussions? Okay? All right. We're getting there. On this list, it says that we work to meet special needs and regular needs. So we're working to meet the needs of the people in our church. Okay? Iron Men. How many think that that's a strength in our church? Okay? Worship service, biblically strong. We already talked about that. Music participation is good. Senior luncheon. I was going to say, Madeline, you better have your hand up here. Okay.
You could lump several of those into social, in-house social ministry.
Yes. So Ironmen and senior luncheon. Well, the ladies is more of a Sunday school class kind of a thing, I think, for the most part, but
But we also mentioned the ladies' prayer.
the ladies' prayer chain.
Other things involved
Yep.
with that, yeah.
Greeters and others welcoming new people. So that comes back to the welcoming idea. Attention to the needs of the sick, that would be meeting needs. Participation in services by people in the congregation. How many people think that that's a strength in our church? We have people in the congregation. I'll tell you what, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Josh does such a good job reading the scriptures. And I really appreciate that. And, you know, our instrumentalists aren't paid from outside the church. We have people from inside. Everybody that participates in our worship is somebody from in our church. So I think that's really good. Good response to financial special needs. So not just regular offerings, but when we have a special need, we have a good response to that. How many think that's a strength of our church? Yep, that love offerings kind of thing, right. All right, one more sheet to go. This took longer than ladies' activities, we've already talked. Men who preach the gospel, I think that fits in the other things we've talked about. Loyalty to the church. How many think that's a strength? Flexibility to deal with change. How many think that's a strength? Okay, well, that's something we're going to have to work on because we're about to go through a big change. Practical biblical teaching, biblically sound. We've talked about that. Warm and friendly group of people. Talked about that. Like a family. Don't disagree for long periods of time. Talked about that. Pastor and deacons are good. Delegators. Okay. Yeah, it says delictators, and I wasn't sure what that was. Delegators, okay. Yeah. It's a couple letters missing, but there's a good excuse for that. All right. How many think that's a good strength of our church? Okay. Location in the city. How many think that's a strength of our church? Yeah. That we pray for one another and our community. How many think that's a strength of our church? All right, I don't know how to do this one. It says pastor is a good Bible teacher. We're just going to leave that alone. That can fit in with some of the other stuff that we've had. Individuals with expertise and talent. That's an interesting idea. How many of you think that we have individuals in our church with expertise and talent that's a strength of our church? Okay? And the last one is nice size, well-maintained, good parking lot. Oh, facility with a good parking lot. Okay. Well, so we've already kind of. That goes along with something else that we had as well, that our facility is kept up well and so forth. All right, I'll tell you what. Rather than force you to sit here for a period of time while I figure out which one of these is the top and second and so forth, why don't we just dismiss? We'll work on this week. Lori and I can work on this. She sat here and listened to this, If I'm way off base, she can correct me. And we'll get this out to our church family and create a list out of this that comes. And maybe it'll be stronger than 10. Maybe there'll be some that we feel like these deserve to be on it, even though we have more than 10. Yes, Gene?
On the same road as that, you gotta do another list. What are our weaknesses?
We are going to do that, just not today. We're going to, and that'll be a more difficult evening, obviously, because we have to face what are the things that we're not doing well. In fact, to some degree, we've already faced a couple of those. Somebody put down evangelism, we didn't get any hands raised. So we've already faced a little bit of that, but we're going to do that as a separate time. They'll probably, I think what we decided in our deacons, I shouldn't say decide, but what we talked about in our deacons meeting is having maybe as many as 3 or 4 of these town meetings where we go through the same process and think about aspects of our church. What we're trying to do is to think about what's strong and what's weak and where we have needs and provide, if you will, provide us a springboard to work on now, but also provide the people who are coming in with a sense of how the congregation views our church. And so this may not be the last time we do strengths. We may do that again after I'm gone. Then we may do it again in that setting. So we'll see how that plays out. But this is a good first start. I want to thank you for coming and participating in this. I think these things are important for us to do. In the book that we're reading, it indicates that you should do this after the pastor has left. We felt like it was an exercise that we should do now while we're thinking about it, and have some things that we can build on over the course of the next coming months. So, Warren?
I think the book was referring to a lot of times when pastors suddenly leaves too.
Yeah.
Get together and do this thing. It didn't say, I don't think the timing was all of it.
No, I don't think it was that important to him. It was just, that was what they were. In fact, the whole book is really geared toward the idea that the pastor is gone, the new pastor isn't there yet, now what do we do? That's really how the whole book is geared. And so we're approaching this from a little different perspective than what the book was written. All right, let's stand and let's be dismissed. Yes, Marina?
Question, I'm just a little confused on, are we looking for a pastor, or are we looking for an interim pastor?
Okay, well, go ahead and stand. You can go ahead and stand. Marina was asking, are we looking for a pastor, or are we looking for an interim pastor? If God put a man in our wheelhouse that was the person that we really believe is the next pastor of our church, before we had an interim pastor, that we would be fine with that. But we're proceeding from the perspective that that may not happen and probably won't happen. And so we're focused in the direction of an interim. If God brings somebody along, and that's part of why I asked a couple of these men, would you pray about it? If God brought somebody along in the meantime, and we felt like we didn't need to go through the route of the interim pastor, fine. But we don't think that's probably going to be the case. As Donald mentioned, churches are sometimes now going through 2 and 3 years of between pastors. And so, is that possible? Yeah, that's possible. In fact, it's more likely that we'll have a period of time between the time I leave and the time you have a new pastor than it is that we'll have a new pastor that comes along. When I came, Pastor Burnett was the pastor in this church until August. And I actually came and spoke at the church about the same time that he left. And then I candidated at the church in October. And because of some things that I had going on up at the church at North Glen that I couldn't leave any earlier than that, the church voted and asked me to come, but I couldn't come until the first of the year. So the church was without a pastor for 4 months. That's almost unheard of today. And so the idea of having an interim pastor is probably at the top of our list right now, unless God brought somebody along that we felt like we could move right in that direction. Does that help?
God will do it.
God will bring us the person he wants. When he wants to do that is his business. So it may not be right away. Yep. Does that help, Marina?
Yeah, but like we would just have like one interim
In all likelihood, right. Yeah, you would have one person that would function.
We'd have an interim pastor for a little bit and then
Another interim pastor, no, that would be more like somebody who is coming to fill the pulpit for a little while. An interim pastor, the idea behind an interim pastor is this is somebody who is helping the church get in a good position, so continuing the kind of work we're doing right now, get in a good position and helping the church also find the man that will fit that church. And the nice part about an interim pastor is he can come in here pretty much with a blank slate. So he doesn't have the history, the biases, all those kinds of things that I would have. But he can come in here and just say, you know, I can look at this with fresh eyes, and I can help the church think through what are its strengths and what are its weaknesses. And he'll look at this and say, that's helpful to hear this from a congregation. But he also is able to look at it with fresh eyes and just say, here's what I think, here's what I see as I'm coming in, and here's where I think I can help the church. So, and interestingly enough, my dad did interim work for a while, but right now, interim pastor work is something that guys are being heavily trained in. Pastor Bailey was talking about working with BCP and as an interim pastor. That probably isn't working out at this point, I don't think, but I mean, they had him going through a class, and they had all kinds of, and tons of reading, including the book we're looking at, that was a part of becoming an interim pastor, working with them. And their restrictions is not the right word, their qualifications are probably not as stringent as some of the other groups. So, all right, let's close with a prayer. Donald, would you close us?
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you that we gather together tonight to discuss the strengths of your local body here. Lord, as we look towards the future, help us to use these strengths, to utilize them well for your honor and glory in this community. Lord, as we go home this week, I pray that as we enter these doors, out these doors, that you would help remind us that we are entering the mission field, that we have the good news of your Son. And we thank you for that, Lord. Help us to spread that this week. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again for coming tonight. The Lord bless you. You're dismissed.